in many cases, that second chance can shift everything. A woman is in a relationship with a man. He's not fully committed because maybe he hasn't found his purpose yet. He feels lost. He doesn't feel his spine. And then she makes him aware, okay, actually, I'm no longer fulfilled in the relationship and I'm going to leave or it's not going to work anymore, whatever is the case. And in that moment when he's about to lose her, the man makes the decision from deep within. And then that couple can actually then experience the deepest union. I have seen literally people go from the darkest depths to the deepest depths. It is possible, and it all depends on context. The quintessence, and to summarize it in one sentence, would be everyone has their own path. And for some people, it means going through a really intense time in their relationship, but they can still find themselves in that if they're willing to go down that path. Genuine work.
So I'd love to hear, how does this work translate to sacred sexuality?
Yes.
I'm Layla Martin. I'm your host of This Tantric Life. This podcast is for you to learn about and be able to use the incredibly powerful system of Tantra in your life. I have been teaching and studying classical and neo-Tantra for over 20 years. And when you apply that to sex, love, and relationships, as I love to do, you end up having conscious relationships, the deepest, most epic and magical sex, and the kind of intimacy that you get to be grateful for on your deathbed. Hi, and welcome to This Tantric Life. I'm your host, Layla Martin. I'm so excited for our conversation today with Lorin Krenn. So he's an internationally sought after teacher, coach, and author. His mission is to help you create the relationship that you want. Lorin has worked with countless clients all over the world, including star performance coaches and highly successful CEOs. I know him as one of the most innovative and impactful voices in sacred relationships right now. His Instagram work especially stops me in my tracks because of the depth and potency of the wisdom. Lorin's focus is always on the root cause, on the core, as he likes to put it, of any relationship challenge. This gives his work an intensity, an edge, and allows for rapid and powerful growth and breakthroughs. Those who have worked with Lorin know that he cares deeply. His greatest joy comes from witnessing people experience profound inner shifts and transformations, allowing them to create the life and relationships they want. If you want to learn more about how you can work with Lorin and learn from his teachings, you can check out the Lorin Krenn podcast, his upcoming trainings on his website, lorinkrenn.com, his one-on-one coaching, and all of that will also be included in the show notes. I'm so excited to welcome today Lorin Krenn and to really have this be a platform to share so much wisdom about sacred partnership, about being a divine masculine and a divine feminine in relating, what polarity really is, and how understanding deeper relationship can support us to have the most satisfying, profound, spiritual, and devotional relationships possible. So when I first came across Lorin's work, it literally arrested me as I was scrolling through Instagram, because his writing and his sharings, there's a unique power and clarity to the transmission. So I wanted to kick off our interview by reading just one little example of the wisdom that he pours out onto Instagram, which is just one of the platforms where he shares his wisdom. So he writes, "What will a man get when he devotes himself to the right woman? Holds space for her? Makes her feel safe? The answer is everything. He will get everything and more." He writes, "When there is wounding with the feminine, there can be limiting beliefs such as, why is this so much work? Why do we have to be aware of so many things to make a woman feel safe? What's in it for us? Why do we have all this responsibility? These questions can only exist if a man has not yet received the deep, unwavering, and unconditional love of a conscious woman. Everything I, quote, do for my wife, I get infinitely back. 3 seconds of holding space for her, and her smile blasts my heart open for the rest of the day. 3 seconds of pulling the chair for her, and her love engulfs me with warmth. My devotion to her allows her to love me the way she has always yearned to love, boundlessly, infinitely. It burns into my heart. Her unconditional love engulfs my entire being. It is truly an experience impossible to capture in words so divine. Men, the feminine wants to love you in the most unconditional, loyal, and unwavering way.
I became emotional because when you're reading this, I just hold my wife in my heart, and this comes from such a deep place. Thank you for reading this. That means a lot.
Yeah. Your teachings of devotion and your teachings on relationship, they come from your marriage and this devotional partnership you're in. Can you share what was it like when you first got into the partnership? And did you have to learn about devotion, or was this always a natural orientation for you?
It's a great question. When I met my wife, there was immediately such a deep connection between us. But this story, it gets a bit crazy, it gets mystical, but it is real, and it is the truthful experience of what I'm about to share. Not long after we first met, I remember it was back in Vienna, where I was originally born, and I was walking to her place, and it was winter at that time, so there was a bit of snow. It was very cold, and I remember so vividly as I was walking towards her, every step that I came closer to her physically, but also, of course, energetically, I started to feel this immense warmth inside me. It was as if the world stopped for a moment. Everything just stopped. And in that moment, there was a bliss I had not experienced. A bliss I had not experienced before. We can call it being fully present, but in the end, it doesn't matter what we call it. In that moment, I felt this deep, deep, incredible love and warmth and joy. And I heard this voice. It's difficult to put it into words. Was it a voice? Was it my own voice? At the end, it doesn't matter. But I heard clearly, wherever you go with her. She is your path. And when I heard that, everything clicked for me. And in that moment, I knew that for the rest of my life, and if you believe it, for all future lives in eternity, my soul is fully devoted to her and to our union. And it wasn't a decision. It wasn't something I said, I'm going to do this right now. I'm going to devote myself because I want XYZ. It was a deeper knowing. And out of that deep knowing comes a devotion that is so powerful. Because what is knowing? Knowing is truth. Knowing is a clarity that goes beyond conceptual understanding. And she's my path. And everything became clear for me in that moment. And from that, I always say she's my muse, and our union inspires me at such a deep level. And I just realized, and many other things, that our union is also my mission. Our union is everything, right? And that might not be the case for every person here and every person listening, but it is the case for me.
Beautiful. So beautiful. I'm here to let you know that if you want to stay connected to my teachings and if you want to support this podcast, the best way to do it is to sign up for my email list. Email list sounds old school, and yet it is where I share my most intimate teachings, the path, process, heartbreak, and triumph of my life, and so much of the content that I make for you on a regular basis. So the way you get on the email list is by heading over to laylamartin.com, put your email address into any of the boxes. You can also sign up for cool practices like sex magic or energy orgasm, totally free. Heading on over to laylamartin.com, signing up with your email address. This supports the podcast. It supports this entire work and is the number one way for you to receive the highest teachings of this path. So you said she is my path. Can you break it down? As a man, what does it mean to make a woman your path?
It's a great question, because we have to be mindful here. Because when a man now abandons his purpose and his mission in life and says, a woman is my path, and it doesn't come from this deeper knowing, from this embodied knowing, then it might have the opposite effect. it might actually lead to challenges in the relationship. Because I always like to say, a man needs to be in full service to have the energy to show up fully for his divine feminine counterpart, for his partner, for his wife, right? So in my case, my union is my mission. They two are one and the same, right? But for other men, and of course it might interlap, but perhaps not in the way it interlaps in my life. For other men, it is really important to be aware of what their deep service in this life is. It's interesting because a lot of men, they want to overcome their insecurities. But most men are insecure because they don't know their deep service, their deep mission in this life, what they were born to do. Because when you know that, it's what I described before. It's this deeper knowing that cuts through everything. It illuminates the path. Everything makes sense. Like the direction you go is so clear. I have no doubt about my direction. Where am I going? What am I going to do? I know it because I feel it so deeply, right? But I have to say, I already had that when I met her. So that's very important to mention. Had I not had that, then perhaps I would have had to first commit and find my service deeper to be able to show up fully for her, right? So in my case, I had that already. For men who don't have that, you can do this in partnership. You don't have to be outside and then you can only do it. The world is not black and white. But I always like to say, as a kind of masculine principle, a man needs to be in his power, in his service. And from there, he has the energy to then fully show up in his relationship. And in my case, it is one and the same.
The way I understand that is men were created to be warriors, to protect that which they love, whether that's their family, whether that's their tribe, whether that's their mission, right? What they most believe in. And I feel like if you break one of those things in a man, you break all of them. And modern society and the past few thousand years of trauma, right? We think patriarchy did all this amazing good for men, but it actually broke a lot of men's ability to know their own true path, to know what they're truly in service of, to know what they really want to do with their lives, right? Because they've often been used in service of others, in service of other people's wars, in service of other people's businesses, in service of other people's beliefs about the world, rather than being taught to be in their own spiritual sovereign power. So one of the things that I've noticed is that when men lose the ability to follow their own sovereign truth and how they want to live their life and what is true for them and what they are here to protect as warriors, they also lose the ability to devote themselves in true partnership. And what I hear you saying that I feel is if a man devotes himself without the power of his dharma, without the power of his path, it becomes a weakening, actually.
Yes.
Just like I'm doing this because I don't have anything else to do. And I feel he gets weaker and even bitter in a way. And so we've seen a version of that, which I think scares men from giving the full devotion because they have so few role models of men in their deep power also being in devotion to the feminine.
What you just shared is profound because this speaks to a dynamic where many couples find themselves in, where the woman is on a deep spiritual journey and she wants more depth. She wants more commitment and she articulates all these things. And the man goes, fuck, I'm going to lose the relationship. So let me do this work. Let me do all these things. But then he ends up, and you basically touched upon this already, he ends up doing this, but it doesn't come from the right energy. It comes from a place of, oh, I want to save this relationship. But why do you want to save it? Because maybe you're afraid. You're afraid of losing her. You're afraid of losing the comfort of that love, of that union. And when I work with men, I always say, or in my men's groups, I always say, if you are doing it for her, then it's not going to work. You're going to fail. It's intense language, but it is intense what I share always. it's just not going to work because the energy won't be powerful enough. And somewhere along, that devotion doesn't come from that deep inner place. It's something external at the end of the day. I'm doing these for in order to, and then everyone feels that. And a woman who is deeply dropped in her, call it divine, sacred, in her true essence, she can sense that energy. She can sense the neediness behind this energy. It's like what you mentioned as sovereign, that deeper, whether it comes from a deeper truth or whether it comes from this place of, oh, I'm afraid of losing you. And that's why I'm doing it. And then when men have this switch, it's like a moment when they say, okay, I'm not doing this for her, even though, of course, I want the relationship to work, but I'm doing this for me. I'm doing this. This transcends even the relationship. It transcends everything. I'm doing this because I want to be in my highest power. And I personally believe that any work we do is meaningless unless we say, I want to be my highest power, no matter what it takes. Because otherwise, it's a bit of a superficial brushing with the pencil, but it's not going to really lead to that deep, internal, lasting change.
Mm, mm. Amazing. I'm excited to take a moment and share with you about the VITA coaching certification. This program has been around for almost 10 years, and it is my highest offering. The sexual wellness industry is forecast to be a $125 billion industry by the year 2026. Why is this? Because people are more ready than ever to express their sexuality and build deeply connected, meaningful relationships, and also, obviously, to have the most outrageous orgasms and erotic experiences of their lives. But most people are never taught how to do any of this, how to have extraordinary relationships, how to have the sex they really crave. They're looking for qualified, confident professionals to teach them. And my VITA Sex, Love, and Relationship Coaching Certification is a powerful 1-year professional certification that's helped more than 2,000 coaches make their way to becoming incredibly successful and highly paid sex, love, and relationship professionals. But this program doesn't just train you in every aspect of the coaching process so that you can build a successful online business. VITA Coaching will also walk you through the personal transformation of a lifetime because the best coaches have done the work themselves. You'll discover so many transformative techniques like breathwork, meditation practices, self-pleasuring tools that you'll apply to your own life first, and then you'll use these same proven tools and techniques to get laser-focused results for your clients. We also hold an exclusive live embodiment retreat just for VITA coaching students and alumni every year. In this retreat, you'll experience 7 days of live teaching with the VITA teachers and I, and really refine your skills as a sex, love, and relationship coach. So if you feel called to claim your spot in this multi-billion-dollar industry and transform not only your own life, but the life of so many others around the world, you can get on the wait list now at Layla Martin VITA waitlist. One of the questions I have meeting your wife in the beautiful snowy streets of Vienna was, can men find that devotion? Like I'm thinking if you're in partnership, right? And you're a woman and you're just like, my man didn't have that moment when he saw me. Are you looking? Yeah. he's never spoken this way about me before. How much of this is you should know right away, right? And you work with so many men. And how many men do work and uncover devotion?
It's such an important question again, because now when people are listening, specifically women, you might be thinking now, but wait a moment, if it's not that, then I can't settle for it. Then it means the relationship is not right. And I just want to emphasize here, no, that doesn't mean the relationship is not right, right? In my case, it was like that. However, many men find themselves, and when do they find themselves? When they hit rock bottom. Does that mean a woman should give a man a million chances and just say, I forgive you, I forgive you? No, of course we have to discern. It's all about the context. However, in many cases, and people don't like to hear this, but I see it all the time, that second chance can shift everything. It can, in some cases, it doesn't. And in other cases, it can shift everything. A woman is in a relationship with a man. He's not fully committed because maybe he hasn't found his purpose yet. He feels lost. He doesn't feel his spine. He's stuck in pleasing tendencies. And then she makes him aware, okay, actually, I'm no longer fulfilled in the relationship and I'm going to leave or it's not going to work anymore, whatever is the case. And in that moment when he's about to lose her, again, now it goes back, does he make that decision to appease her? Or, and this is where it goes back to what I mentioned before, the man makes the decision from deep within.
Mm.
And then a shift happens. And then that couple can actually then experience the deepest union. I've seen it. I have seen literally people go from the darkest depths to the deepest depths. It is possible. It is possible. And it all depends on context. Maybe the way to the quintessence and to summarize it in one sentence would be everyone has their own path. And that own path holds so much depth within. And it's not about someone else's path, because at the end of the day, if you're looking at someone else's path, you're still trying to control your life. You're outsourcing. You're saying, let me do it like this, so I'm in control, so I feel more safe. But the universe is always asking us, go deeper, go deeper. What is your path? Back to when you said Dharma, our Dharma, right? That's how I would connect it to.
Yeah. And I feel this often as, we both teach people about relating and relationships. And to me, the cosmic joke of that is like, well, no matter what we could possibly say, at the end of the day, the universe wants you to make original art with your life. The universe wants you to be living according to your own wisdom, which means that there's no overarching playbook you can follow, right? You can listen and become inspired by ideas, feel these touch points inside of yourself of like, oh, that feels true to me, or I want something more like that. But love is far more of an original expression of divine truth than any kind of rule book you could ever follow.
Yes. And for some people, it means going through a really intense time in their relationship, where they really display patterns that are dysfunctional, that are rooted in trauma, that are rooted in so much pain, and they lose themselves, but they can still find themselves in that if they make the choice, if they're willing to go down that path.
Absolutely. And I do think a distinction I'd like to make for women who are listening is men are a lot smarter than popular culture would have women give them credit for, right? There's kind of this trope of like men are kind of idiots and they do one thing, they don't really know what they want. And, he's doing this to you, he's pushing you away, or he's in a situationship because like, actually he's really going to turn into your devoted king or whatever. And I've found men do know truth within themselves. And so they might not yet be ready to devotionally choose into partnership and do all of the work and understand the true nature of partnership that they can grow into. But men do know whether you are a partner they can choose into. They do know if they love you devotionally. And so I just wanted to articulate that because I see sometimes women waiting around for that to shift. And I do see that men usually know whether they can devote to you, whether you are someone they can be in a long-term relationship with, whether you are someone that they love with the fullness of their heart. And staying for anything less is often a path to tremendous pain. However, a man can choose you with the fullness of his heart and have no training or understanding of the Mount Everest, as Annie Layla likes to say, that is true love, right? The level of work that's required, the level of facing your shadow, the level of finding deep devotion within you. And so I'd be curious your opinion on this. I feel like that's often an initiatory curve for a lot of men to discover the work it actually takes to be in devotional partnership with someone who is not your plaything or your ego accoutrement but your queen. And I'm curious what you see, because to me, your teachings really help men understand that so they can stay in it rather than just going for the easy thing. It's like you articulate what is so worth it about doing the deeper, harder work of being in true love and true partnership, rather than the old model, which is like, oh, this is someone who looks good on my arm and she'll just say yes to me, right? So what have you found that you tell men so that they can understand partnership through that lens rather than maybe the old school conditioning?
I always like to say to men, there are two paths. One path is where they choose a woman who feels comfortable to them, who strengthens their own ego. They get away with their bullshit, with their shadow, with their insecurities. They get away because the woman is operating from a place of generational trauma. My voice doesn't matter. I am not good enough, right? I will be rejected. I will be left if I embody the fullness of my heart's truth, if I really express what my intuition senses at a deeper level. And a man can choose this path, but he will eventually resent the woman. He will resent her because deep down, a part inside him senses there is attachment there. She's not choosing me from her deepest depth, and neither is he choosing her from his deepest depth, right? And that might be cool for some men at their level of consciousness, like that's really comfortable and I feel great. But eventually, a deep emptiness is going to follow. And every man who's done any work, right, apart from maybe 0.1% who maybe never awaken, right? Perhaps that exists as well. But almost every man who goes through this journey of choosing such relationships eventually faces a deep emptiness inside him because he realizes that it's not in integrity. It's not the path of integrity and the path of truth. And which leads us to the second path, which is the path of not choosing a woman. Some men misunderstand this, who challenges you all day long, criticizes you, tells you you're not good enough, you're worthless. That's not what I'm referring to. It's a woman who loves you so deeply that she would rather she would risk, let's put it that way, she would risk the relationship and connection because she cares more about the man's growth and truth than about feeling comfortable in the relationship or feeling like, oh, I've got a man by my side, right? And that is the ultimate path because it is, let's call it unconditional love. I prefer devotional love, what we've mentioned before. It is the most devotional love there is. And the feminine or the divine feminine, I sense that's part of the medicine she's meant to bring to this world. To say love is not this softy, I'm just soft and surrender all day long. But love is so much deeper and sometimes also fiercer because love is truth and truth is love at the end of the day. So this is the most truthful way of loving. And that is a woman who, it's the way I can describe it for everyone listening, the somatic experience is I sense the deepest love from my wife, but I also know that I'm not going to get away with my bullshit, with my lack of presence in a moment, or not completely listening in that moment, or being unconscious and not getting away. It's not that she criticizes me, but it's that she will make me aware for her infinite ways of the feminine, how the feminine expresses herself. And this now becomes this mirror. It becomes this reflection that allows a man to sharpen his awareness, to sharpen his consciousness like nothing else, because it is ultimately spirituality in motion. Rather than just sitting down and meditating, but he doesn't really know, did he experience any growth now? Well, no idea. Maybe he was just thinking in that meditation. Nothing wrong with meditation. But here, it's almost like suddenly we've got a practical way to see where we are at in our spiritual journey. And I thought I had certain things healed. And then my wife made me aware, no, you haven't. right? Or here you lose presence, here you lose focus, right? You didn't fully listen. And I'm like, at the beginning, I became sometimes defensive, right? Which is often a generational trauma of men. But that is what I meant with the path of embracing that as a man and saying, wow, this might be challenging to receive right now, but she's showing me the things that I normally wouldn't be able to see. And this allows a man to rapidly, if he is ready for that, evolve in consciousness. This is why I say relationships are spirituality in motion. One last thing I will say, everything can be faked except devotion. No one can fake devotion in a relationship because it's deeper than just no lies, no secrets, no betraying. It's deeper than that. It's an energy that can be viscerally felt. And you ask me, what do I say to men? This is how I will finish my answer. What I say is, a man's level of devotion and commitment to his partner reflects his level of consciousness. No one wants to hear this, but it's the truth. The spiritual guru who has done so much work, but he can't commit and he's still sleeping around all the time. I'm sorry to say it, but maybe his meditations didn't work, because in the one area where it's reflected at the highest level, there's still so much pain and unconsciousness.
Absolutely. And in what you're saying, I hear the articulation of the feminine journey, right? We're talking about the man coming and finding his purpose and being open to hearing truth, right? Removing his defensiveness, choosing a woman who is his path, and the warrior consciousness of that. We've said devotion, right? And to me, the feminine has to learn to risk everything for devotion to the highest love. And so what it actually feels like inside of me when I know there's something that I have to say to my partner, and when it's a big thing, it actually feels inside of me like I might lose him. Like I might lose love. I might lose this relationship. I might, have to endure all these things that feel very uncomfortable to a feminine nervous system, which my feminine nervous system is like, keep everything safe, be protected, keep harmony, right? And what I'm being asked to do is go beyond that, where the love of truth, right? As you said, truth and love are synonymous. So the love of truth becomes more important to my heart than my smaller attachment to being loved, to being chosen, to having a man by my side, as you say. And to serve that is a feminine empowerment. It is a sovereign empowerment. I mean, it's an empowerment for everyone, but I find that to be one of the key parts of the feminine journey in relating. And I'm very interested in where you can see things called pre, post, and trans, right? This is an intellectual structure, I think, that comes from Ken Wilber, which is things that come from total unconsciousness, and then you heal them and what you see, but then something that goes beyond all of that. And so to me, in these lower levels of engagement, when things are really unconscious, the feminine nitpicks, criticizes, and makes wrong, right? And in many ways, when I was doing that, it was my own pain body that was so terrified of love, basically projecting onto the man in front of me. Like, you're not good enough. You'll never be good enough for me. I'm going to criticize you. And I thought I was just making him a better man or giving him my feedback. And what I was really doing was killing him with 1,000 paper cuts and destroying our love. And for him, it was defensiveness, right? This doesn't feel good. And in a way, he has a right to try and protect himself when that is the energy of consciousness that's coming at him. Then I feel like we get to this next phase where it's like, wow, as the feminine, I don't criticize my man like that. I don't talk badly about him. I don't project onto him. And for a man, he's like, I also heal from this oversensitivity, this defensiveness, right? And so you move into this post phase of, I don't want to fight like my parents did, or I don't want to hate men like my mom or my grandmother did. And for men, it's like, I also want to love my partner. I don't want to be in conflict with her the entire time. But there's this trans, which I hear you talking about, which is, how do we speak truth to one another and let that truth actually be the alchemical healing force of our partnership? And I think the scariest thing about speaking truth or speaking from your heart is that it requires devotion to a higher truth than anything that your ego could want in the moment. So if this is the truth of the moment, I always have to risk the relationship being loved, the harmony that's here right now. And this to me is like the biggest act of devotion in the feminine heart, is I will risk everything for love, which isn't equivalent to the relationship. Love is so much bigger than that. And that's this act of courage that I feel is so profound. And I'm still leaning into that, every day in my own partnership, this inner pull in me to just have harmony versus the bigger devotion to truth wherever that takes me.
It's when what you mentioned about when the feminine is criticizing. In the most important thing here is a man cannot trust the feminine when this deeper intuition wants to come through, but there comes so much wounding with it. Yeah. So then it becomes really vague and unclear, which is not easy for the feminine. It's not easy, but it becomes very difficult because now suddenly it's like, whoa, okay, maybe there's a bit here, but what's that other bit? Perhaps father wounding can be the case. And it suddenly turns into something where it's not completely, where he's like, okay, I want to trust this, but I can't trust this fully because part of this is wounding, part of this is truth. So the feminine goes through a journey here, right? And we need to be compassionate with one another. No one is always perfect, right? Sometimes there might be a deep intuitive knowing that comes through her, and then through his response, her own triggers become alive, and then it diverts from all of that, and it becomes a major disconnect about something else. But at the end of the day, as the feminine goes through this journey within of being able to really come from a place of what you mentioned, being devoted to love, which is being devoted to the highest truth, then a man knows when she says something, when I met with her fierceness, there is a deep reason for this. I can trust this reason. And this creates a total different level of depth. And on the flip side, when I say men can become defensive, which is a big generational trauma, a man can only protect his truth when he's met with extreme criticism. Because when a man says, when a woman criticizes a man extremely, and a man then says, kind of just holds space and listens to her and takes it in, he's being a pleaser. He's being a doormat. He has no spine anymore, and that will create other painful dynamics. So in that moment, the medicine he needs to embody is to stand in his power. And he might say, how does that look like for people listening from a grounded perspective? From a grounded place, he might say, baby, we can talk about everything. I really want to make this work. But when you say these disrespectful things to me, that doesn't work for me. And I'm ready to have that conversation, but not in this way. And here it's like there's a grounded power in that, but also there is love in that. There isn't like slamming the door and running away and being like, no, there is like this, it's fierce, but it's love.
I'm going to be super real with you. I realized that the number one thing I want in my life is to feel good. right? An amazingly happy life is built on feeling good inside of the nervous system. Those are some of the most challenging feeling states to achieve when we're being bombarded by emails and screen time and overwhelming to-do lists and career and family pressures. And to reset the nervous system to be in its natural state of pleasure and play, that's right, nature actually wanted us to feel pleasurable, playful, sensual. It takes work. Research has shown it can take up to 2 hours to switch from go mode to deep relaxation, where you want to connect and feel good. If you're like me and you don't have 2 hours at the end of the day to meditate, to do yoga, then supplements and plants can actually help your nervous system to feel the ways that you crave. If you're interested in supporting your nervous system to feel the way that you most desire to feel, then go ahead and check out our mood line to shop the entire mood product line and unlock the pleasure you crave. I'm so excited to tell you about my sexuality training for men. If you have ever wanted to take your study in Tantra and advanced sexual mastery to the next level, then this training is for you. More and more men are waking up to the fact that there is a whole next level of confidence, pleasure, and power available to them when they step away from relying on things like porn and fantasizing to drive their sexuality, and instead begin to approach both life and sex in a more primal, present, and embodied way. I know that those are the kind of men that I feel most drawn to, but releasing the stories, negativity, and stagnant energy that hold you back from becoming a truly exceptional lover requires what I call the holistic tools of sex. These are practices like breath work, energy activation, sounding, mindfulness, and movement. So I designed this 7-week men's sexual mastery training to train you in all of these tools so you can shift your psychological and energetic approach to sex. This allows your body to last longer, allows you to have multiple orgasms without ejaculation, and to experience flow states during sex. This is all done through powerful 20-minute practices that you can do once a week or daily if you desire. So if you've wanted to train yourself in a program like this to take your sexuality to a whole new level, join me in the Men's Sexual Mastery Training at laylamartin.com/MSM. So you teach polarity work. I'm wondering if you could share a little bit about what polarity is and why it's not just this hidden spiritual way to get us back to like old school misogynistic gender roles.
When I hear the word polarity, it's funny because there's so many misconceptions about this word. Sometimes I even struggle to use it because I'm like, this word is so loaded. People will misunderstand it. And I just see something totally different with it. Because if we look back at where polarity comes from, it doesn't have its roots in some kind of traditional gender values. That's all some new things that people have attached to polarity to kind of fuel their own dogmatic approach and way of seeing the world. But if we look at polarity, we can see that this is, isn't it incredible that when we look at polarity, that there were so many traditions in the past that didn't know of each other and yet had a similar system and described a similar system, yin, yang, masculine, feminine, right? I don't want to go too deep into that because I want to stay practical, but it's almost like there is a deeper universal law that is there, and it's not gender specific. I use heterosexual language for simplicity and poetic reasons because it would get a bit messy if you would have to write that all clearly. It just doesn't fit. But I always say that, right? This applies to every relationship and in any dynamic, right? You have masculine, feminine polarity. We all have masculine, feminine energies within us. And the big dangers with this work is that, which in any work, is that we just conceptually understand this and it doesn't come from an embodied level. And now we go, I need to be more masculine. I need to be more feminine. I need to fit into this box. But actually, it has nothing to do with that. These ancient teachings have everything to do with us stepping into our authentic power, into our authentic truth. Every man is different in his masculine embodiment. Every woman is different in her feminine embodiment. That looks differently, that feels differently. And that's the medicine that we bring to the world. So when people say, this is how polarity looks like, I go, no, this is how it looks like for you. But for someone else, it might look differently. And Having said that and becoming more practical, there are certain principles, energetic principles that are really deeply archaic, that are rooted in that. So using heterosexual language, a man and a woman, a man in this scenario has a more masculine energy, a more masculine or predominantly masculine core. The woman has a predominantly feminine core. It's not the case for everyone. But in this example, one of the energetics that is going to play out is what we've described before, that the feminine is the energetic master, or is the internal leader, the spiritual leader, the oracle, and the masculine is the, so to speak, external leader, the warrior, the protector, the one who is action orientated. And this dance will start to play out. It's like she is the vision, she sees what is possible. And then he shows up through his presence, through his devotion, through his leadership. And that's the dance, right? Mm. And this dance is in every relationship, and it goes much deeper than that. And it goes truly much, much more deeper than that. But that will be kind of the quintessence of it. And it has nothing to do with weaponizing this against others. For instance, women saying, "Oh, I'm unhappy because he's not masculine enough." Let's wait a moment. There's definitely things also on your end. Or the other way, or I'm not happy because she's not feminine enough, right? Which now is the perfect blame game, which I also see happening. Oh yeah, it's just, you're not holding space. You're not present enough. You're not this enough. You're not that enough, right? This has nothing to do with that.
Yeah, I think to me, what's been sad about polarity culture, this has been my experience being in this field for so long, is that there is an essential truth of polarity, and there is a lot of shadow in the polarity world. So it is actually true that some of the main original teachers of polarity studied with like true misogynists, like documented misogynists, that they worked with really unintegrated teachers who had a horrific record of treatment of their students and women, and that some of that I have felt got into their teachings, right? Like one of the main polarity teachers, like one of my friends went and studied with him, and she's like this badass businesswoman, and she's an amazing investor, and she's also got a heart of gold, and she's in an incredibly healthy long-term partnership now. At the time she was single, and he was like, "You'll never find a man if you don't spend more time in the kitchen." I've also been around other polarity teachers who are like, you know, they're like in their 60s, and they're like, "Well, I have to date women who are in their 20s or 30s because I'm a masculine man and I need a lot of Shakti." You know, so truly it's like people who are free thinkers and who have a lot of deep connection to themselves that have spent time in the polarity world. There's a lot of overlap with pickup artists, right? Like, I'm going to learn all these like masculine skills and techniques so like I can get laid. And so rightfully so, some people look at that and they're like, wow. Then there's the shadow, which you referenced, of like studying polarity, and a little bit of that can be a dangerous thing. I did the classic, like, you know, being unintegrated and in my trauma when I was in my 20s, and just like lashing out at my man and then being like, "You can't hold me. You're not a superior man." Right. So had to learn the hard and dirty way that that was not polarity. And so a lot of people mistake polarity, as you said, for these new gender roles of like men are like this and women are like this. The way that I experience true polarity is that humans got weakened and dismantled in their sovereign sexual, spiritual, intellectual power over the past few thousand years. I don't know why it happened, right? Some people are like, the aliens fucked with our DNA. Other people are just like, yo, it was traumatic to be on this planet. Other people are just like, who knows? It might be a cycle of light and darkness in the Hindu traditions. But I know for sure that humanity got super lost, that we have superpowers, that we have so much mystical magic and connection within us, that we are living, breathing, expressions of divinity, and that very few people are living that. We're living swamped in unworthiness and self-criticism, in deep trauma in our nervous systems, and our world is an expression of that. To me, true polarity is that there is a way that women are when they are free of that burden of trauma, and when they let themselves express in alignment with divine power. And there's a similar way to me that men behave, like that. It's almost like man and woman, when you remove the trauma and you remove all of this heavy conditioning and you let them be the fullness of their sexuality, their heart, their spiritual power. This to me is true polarity. And a lot of people taught that who, from my perspective, were not very integrated in their humanity. And so they made polarity seem like just another dogma, just another men are like this and women are like this. Whereas I feel like the teachers that I resonate with, and I definitely resonate with how you teach, it's like discover what it is to be a man when you're not weighed down by your wounding, when you're not telling yourself the lie that you're less powerful than you really are, when you're not shut down from your spiritual truth. And that, whatever men end up being, to me, that is the vision of polarity. And I feel you articulating that. And underneath everything that you're articulating is a tremendous amount of work for most people to do the trauma healing, to do the energy activation, to do the spiritual work so that they actually can discover this. Because the taste of being a woman like that, the taste of being a man like that is exquisite. It's so wondrous.
It absolutely is well described. And you said something really important here, and that is there is just no way around the most painful work. There is no way around it. And perhaps some people approach relationships from these expectations that, I can escape there, I can drown my sorrow in there, or I can just do a little bit of work and then it's going to work. And it's just everything always leads us ultimately to ourselves. And it leads us to the things we need to work on that are holding us back from stepping into our highest power and truth. And I believe also that specifically now that spirituality has become more mainstream, which is great in a way, and in another way, it becomes harder perhaps, or perhaps it has always been this way, to find truth. And it's almost like it's difficult to describe this in words, but all of this is about embodiment, because when we experience this, what Layla was describing right now, is at a deeper level, then it just makes sense. So no one will be when you are fully embodied. Even when I use this word, it's like, okay, what does it mean? But when you are, for lack of a better word, fully embodied, or you experience this at a deeper level, then you just know, you feel this, and this polarity is there, and this dance of energy is there, and you're not kind of artificially trying to make this work, and I'm just going to breathe deeply now and be a masculine man. None of that happens. That's all insecurity. Like when we are in our highest power, it just flows effortlessly. So I like what you said before. Ultimately, it's a returning to who we are. And when we return to who we are, we're not thinking about polarity. We're not thinking about this practice and how do I do this. No, all the practices only serve us to allow us to return to who we truly are. And from that place, everything starts to make sense. Holding space as a man, is that difficult? Absolutely not. But the journey of getting to a place where you can hold space is really, really hard and not easy. But once you're there, it's not going to be always perfect and easy and you're perfectly enlightened, but it's going to come natural. And this kind of deeper archaic, where maybe the woman is going for an emotional challenge and he takes her in his arm and breathes with her. And again, he's not doing that in order to, or because he thinks he needs to. It's something that naturally happens, right? And yeah.
So if you're watching this and you're like, I want to have sex like that, honestly, I want to have sex like that too, like all the time, then I have made this incredible guide called Epic Sex. And what it does is it trains you in techniques and tools that you can use to have the 6 different types of sex. And so these are sensational sex, where you feel like, ooh, like all activated and your feels are all there. Electric sex, where that chemistry is crackling and you can actually create that with tools like breath work and conscious touch. Wild sex, where you can actually train your nervous system to let go of inhibitions or thinking too much or being in your head and let go into your deep primal expression, which is so sexy to do with someone that you love. You learn tantric sex, which is how to activate your energy system, your chakras, and to be able to see the divine in your lover. Kinky sex, which trains you in how to create safe spaces so that you can explore edges and fantasies together. And enlightened sex, which teaches you all about masculine, feminine polarity dynamics, how to get into peak radiance and surrender or peak presence and containment. So if this is something that you want to explore, you can go ahead and get the guide. It's totally free. It's 77 pages. It is chock full of amazing trainings, and you can get it at laylamartin.com/epic sex. This depth that you're articulating is born of decades of work. Right? It's something that you earn over devotion to knowing yourself, devotion to coming home to yourself. I was just, as you were talking, I was like, there's kind of like a wah wah to this podcast where it's like, you can have the most incredible, outrageous sex. You actually are a superhuman. You can be in this like deep, loving, devotional partnership. It's like, but you're going to have to feel the most epic amount of pain, probably for years. It's like, I paid for my femininity in tears in the fetal position. Right? Like, and what we're trying to say to people is it's not a single workshop that'll get you there. It's years and years and years. The first Tantra school that I went to, one of the things I loved about it, right, was they were like, 5 years is the starter program. Like you're going to wake up at 4 a.m. and you're going to do 6 hours of spiritual practice 5 days a week for 5 years. And that will start you on the journey. And as you're saying, in this pop culture spirituality, that gets missed sometimes, right? Even some, of people that I love and respect, it's like they've done 20 ayahuasca ceremonies, and that's like enough for this wild visionary, I am now a spiritual teacher. And really there's such a humility both to how long true spirituality requires to develop and cultivate, and also how much what looks glamorous, right? Like you are so well spoken. You have such a beautiful partnership that you articulate. So many people would dream of being with a man like you. And everything that looks glamorous in my life, it was, yes, bought by my vision, having a high vision for myself and wanting to live that in this lifetime. But it was paid for by a willingness to meet my pain body, which is one of the most painful things a human can do. And in true relating, you come face to face with your pain body, like you've said, in a way that you can escape if you just meditate in a cave, or you can escape if you just have a series of lovers, but you cannot escape it in the crucible of devotional love. And that's one of the most powerful things about devotional love, in a way, is like, I am going to do this and feel this because I can't imagine a world without you in it. And to realize our highest truth as a couple requires me to work my way through this pain so it no longer separates us.
And I see it as the feminine. It's this, what you described before, this devotion to the highest truth, to the highest love. And for men, I would, even though that's similar, many things are similar, but I would describe it slightly differently to add to what you shared already. Being willing to die. That's actually really powerful. And it's why are specifically men, but also women, touched by movies about warriors, touched by, it doesn't matter which movie, but where a man makes this decision to ride into battle, which ultimately is a kind of physical expression, but it's the inner battle, right? It symbolizes something deeper. And why are we so touched by this? We are so touched by this because that's something so deeply archaic. And I had moments in my life where I was on my knees and I made the choice. either, and I don't recommend this to everyone, that's my intensity, that's my path. Not every people maybe do it more comfortably, I don't know. But I said, either I'm going to die right now or I'm going to make this work. I'm going to go to the highest level no matter what it takes. I don't care. I'm going to sacrifice absolutely everything. And that's when, did everything align perfectly from that moment? No. But that intention, that devotion came from so deep within that then the path became clear. And if it wasn't clear, it had to become clear because that's the energy we bring. And perhaps many people approach spirituality, and I did as well in the past, from this place of, yeah, let me do a little bit of work. Let me try a few things. Or maybe I do a little bit and then see. And you will look at it as self-improvement. But there is no self-improvement in spirituality. It's either you do a little bit and then you become aware of how fucked up you really are, or you choose to go all the way. And that's not easy.
Yeah. That's been my vow even before this partnership. I was in front of my altar. I had my big altar and then a gold stripper pole because that's the way that I pray. And I was on the floor in front of the altar and I said, bring me the highest love. I will do whatever it takes. And when I say that to people, sometimes they're like, oh, you're like putting into the universe to be like challenged or tested. And to me, it's like, no, I mean, I will do whatever it takes. I will do whatever healing. I will do whatever devotion. I will do whatever self-reflection. I will meet any challenge because it means that much to me. And having that level of clarity and a sense of this is what I want more than anything else, to me, exactly as you say, that's what reveals the path. And so for people listening right now who want their own relationship to become more a mirror of this divine expression, like you're articulating, or who want to become more sincere embodiments of what is true woman, true man for them, to me, that prayer is the singular way that I know that people get there. Just like you're saying, it is so important to me and I will do whatever it takes. It's so important to me and show me the way. When anybody makes that sincere level of vow to the universe, I have never seen it go unmet. One of the Sanskrit words, the 1,000 names of the goddess, is one who loves vows. And there is this way in which I feel the goddess rewards people who make deep and sincere vows, and it can be a lost art. But I love you articulating it as such an example of what it can be to make that kind of commitment to your life and your growth.
Yes, and I also don't believe in this kind of, you're asking the universe to be challenged. For me, it's clear. I'd rather die right now than be a cheater or out of integrity and live a life of emptiness and secrecy in that moment. That's it. And that's the kind of devotion and virtue that it's ultimately also virtue. I love that word specifically for men that can be very powerful. Is a man of virtue, because integrity and truth is a virtue. It's something deeper, or a vow, as you mentioned. It's something that comes from a deeper place. And like you said, this is an energy you don't get to with one ayahuasca ceremony or perhaps one person in a rare scenario, but usually you don't. It's something that really takes deep work, genuine work.
Yeah. And a series of decisions every single day over a lifetime. So I'd love to hear, how does this work translate to sacred sexuality?
Yes. It's a great question. From my perspective about sacred sexuality, it all starts, of course, outside the bedroom, because a couple can do all the practices in the world, but if outside that level of connection and that level of polarity is not there, then it's not going to translate into the bedroom. Typical example very quickly, and then I'll get more practical. When a man is with a woman, emotional intimacy is important for men as well, but usually for women it's even more important, as she feels this at such a deep, subtle level. And then it's like men come to me and say, I'm not having as much sex or intimacy as much as I want it to be. And I'm like, okay, but stop focusing on the bedroom for just a moment. That comes later. Let's focus on all the other things that are happening outside of the bedroom, right? And when they start working on that, suddenly that translates naturally, almost so to speak, into the bedroom. But that doesn't mean it's done, obviously, because that's the starting point. And then we come into the topic of the sexual shadow, which I believe is the hardest motherfucker to work through for most people. You cannot imagine how many people I know who are at a certain level of spirituality, but when it comes to sex and intimacy, there is some level of unconsciousness. There is still a wounding. There is still a shadow going on, right? Because there's so much shame. There is so much shame around this, so much incredible shame. I'm sure you must have talked about this on your podcast a million times. But there's so much shame around this. And this is where we go into the darkness when it comes to the spiritual work. This is really where we get challenged at the highest level. What does this mean? Ultimately, it means, I call it transcending the sexual shadow. That's how I feel it for me. That's how I perceive it. And working through the sexual shadow is so important because our sexual shadow associates sex and intimacy with pleasure. And pleasure is beautiful, but pleasure gets put on a pedestal, and truth, devotion, safety get brushed aside. And then what do you have? You have these dynamics where people do things just for the sake of pleasure. Example, a man runs away with the secretary after 20 years of marriage, or let's use a better example, has 5 minutes of sex with someone and ruins his marriage, ruins his family. And many people will say, wow, he didn't love them. What an arse. But maybe that's the truth in some cases. But in many other cases, how powerful is this sexual shadow that a man who is, in this example, happy in his relationship loses himself and for 5 minutes of pleasure destroys his life. This gives us, or a woman, vice versa. This gives us an understanding for everyone listening here how strong this unconsciousness is, because sexual energy, perhaps the most primal energy we have. And that's why working with it is challenging, because we cannot control it from my perspective. We cannot resist it. As we resist it, it becomes more obsessive. We strengthen the sexual shadow. Anyone who try to fight their sexual urges usually finds themselves acting them out even more. So it requires this deep level of surrender and this deep level of releasing the shame around that. And how does this translate to sacred sexuality? As we work through the sexual shadow, we start to associate, or we start to relate to sex and intimacy through the sacred, through love, through something much deeper. That includes pleasure, but pleasure is a mere byproduct of it and not at the forefront. That's my personal truth and perspective. I understand others have a different perspective. And that brings the sacred into the bedroom as well. And then it becomes, I like to say, a spiritual initiation. In that experience, because it opens our heart more. It makes us more present. And also it allows us to embody the fullness of who we are and heal deep-rooted shame. Deep-rooted shame. So many men struggle with performance anxiety. So many men. And many times they come to me, they've gone through thousands of hours of therapy, and they tell me, no, it's erectile dysfunction. And I'm not a doctor. Erectile dysfunction does exist. I'm aware of this. But often the root of it is psychological, energetically emotional. And when a man then works through that, everything starts to work again.
What are some of the expressions of men who are still run by sexual shadow? Like, let's say men who have done a lot of spiritual work and then they're still really controlled by their sexual shadow.
This will get challenging now, triggering for some people listening. Great. But most likely everything else anyway already. But one of them could be, I'm going to give several examples. One of them could be choosing women who are operating from a place of trauma and have a strong father wound and are looking for a savior. Kind of, I don't like the word daddy issues because there is a lot of stigma and a lot of judgment around it. Oh, look at her, she's got daddy issues. Look at him, he's got some real issues as well, right? I mean, he has other issues, right?
I've got major daddy issues. I just built an empire, you know?
And
as a result. No shame.
And so he might choose a woman who is operating from that place because he's also operating from a place of trauma, both. And then he chooses her because he can be this knight in shining armor, and she will never challenge him. She will never, what we mentioned before, express her deep intuition that challenges him, that makes him aware of his own unconsciousness and trauma and wounding that he's not yet aware of. Another example might be men who are, for instance, overly attracted only to young women. This kind of idea that young women have a better feminine energy is the biggest bullshit in this universe, because this is about energy. This is about energy. Everything is about energy. Physical beauty is nothing. A person can be physically beautiful, but if their energy is shit, excuse my language, well, they are not by definition beautiful. Sorry to say so, but there is this deep void of emptiness in that energy, and the only person who finds them beautiful is disconnected from themselves, right? They don't feel that deeper dynamic of energy. So that could be this is a very strong one, this kind of only young women. Why? Because there is a fear of the wise feminine, the mature feminine, because there is a different wisdom that comes with that. And the young woman tends to be more in the maiden archetype, the kind of woman who she doesn't know, she says yes to everything, or she doesn't know what her path is. She doesn't have that deeper devotion to love, and that's where that comes from ultimately. And of course the most common other expression would be, there are many more, but the common one would be still sleeping around and kind of needing these new connections to fill a deeper void, right? And there's nothing wrong with dating. For people listening to this, everyone can date. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just the sleeping around and constantly doing that, and that seeking of novelty. The sexual shadow loves novelty. So when a man is deeply in his sexual shadow, he might suddenly have issues in the bedroom with a woman who is conscious, because he might actually not feel attracted to her. Why? Because she's embodying that wise, deeper feminine energy, and he's used to fast-paced, kind of daddy issue, kind of trauma sex, for lack of better words. So he can't relate to that deep love. Because why? Because suddenly he has to be in touch with his emotions. It's not that he's not attracted to her. It's that to feel the attraction towards her, he needs to feel the depth of his own emotion and heart. And what is he going to feel? Pain, because he's never worked on it. Hence why he doesn't feel attraction to her.
It's so important to see that as a woman, because men's sexual shadow can be so painful when you encounter it and you don't let it be about him, right? The man I was dating right before my partner, who we could have had it all. Like, we had the blueprint for the most power partnership, the deepest devotion. And from my perspective, this is just my perspective, he went for that junior princess, easy, I will just be coddled kind of feeling. And I remember watching it happen. And one of the things that I was so proud of as it happened was, I believe it was the first time in my life I didn't turn a man's sexual shadow back on me and use it as an excuse to hate myself. I watched it in real time, and I also let him be him. And we also, I have to be careful with projections. Like, who knows what the truth is in there? But in my experience, I watched him choose someone very, very junior. And as much as it hurt my heart that me and him wouldn't be able to build what I knew was possible between us, I also was able to see it clearly. And what I see is so many women take the male sexual shadow on themselves. They use it to cut themselves. And so I think it's very important to see that sexual shadow for what it is, the same way that it's important for men to be able to see when a woman is in her emotional shadow and it's got nothing to do with him, right? And her criticisms or her intensity are actually not on him. And so this ability to see clearly is so important. Also, I want more Lorin unleashed. Let's trigger some more people. So what I have a few more questions for you as we start to wrap. So the first is for women out there who are thinking, I want to meet a conscious man, right? And this is one of the most common questions that I get. I want to meet a conscious man. What can I do? What's the real truth from you?
We live in a world where there are more conscious men than ever before, from my perspective. So this idea that men before were better, men before had XYZ, perhaps men before had more manners and were more gentlemen. That is true. I do believe it's a shame that we lose these values in certain ways, but that's my personal truth, my subjective opinion. Everyone is entitled to their own, of course. But this idea that men before were better somehow, anything like that. They were also cheating, struggling with their sexual shadow, all the same stuff going on, right? But now we live in a world, yes, spiritual bypassing can happen and all of what we've talked about today. However, there's never been more opportunity for men in today's world to step up. There's still few masculine role models, but there are more than ever before from my perspective, because men are stepping into this work. And so this idea that there are no conscious men is simply not true. And also we need to reframe. What is a conscious man? What is that? Is it a man who reads about spirituality all day long, who can tell you about all the chakras? Or is it a man who lives with integrity, who lives with truth? Many women come to me and say they want a spiritual man. And I say, okay, what does that mean? And it's like a checklist.
I want a
he's...
Tulum frog shaman.
Yes.
I don't want him to spend a lot of time at ecstatic dance.
and he doesn't need to do ecstatic dancing. He doesn't even need to understand what I'm talking about. There are men literally exist. They go, listen, Lorin, I really respect you, but I don't get it. I don't get this awakened feminine. What? I don't get it. Listen, you sound like a nice guy, Lorin, but I don't get it. I don't get any of it. But they are more spiritual than other men. Because deep down they are committed. Not all, of course, but deep down they're committed. They live with integrity. They embody these virtues. And it's interesting because when women reframe their perspective, they start to go, wait a moment. I'm not looking for this perfect checkbox conscious man. I'm looking for a man of truth, a warrior of truth. And I trust and surrender to what the universe decides is the right person for me. And this shifts the energy. This might seem subtle, but it shifts the energy, right? It also means women not only get lost in this kind of spiritual, man has to be spiritual, man has to be this. This means nothing. It means nothing. He's meditating, so what? Great. But is there the embodiment that follows it? Is it a beautiful add-on? Of course, right? When a woman wants that and a deeply spiritually stimulating conversation, that's fine. That exists as well. But it's that reframing that and accepting might be hard to say, but opening yourself to the idea that there are conscious men, there are men who live with integrity. They're not shouting from the mountain roof, from the mountain. No, they're not shouting from the roof or from the mountain top, but I like to call them the unsung heroes, right? Some men might become glorified just by talking about this work, but it's the deeper integrity and the deeper service, that humility that you talked about, that humility, that's the real embodiment of spirituality, right? And that allows women to reframe that. And of course, now focusing on the other side of that question, as long as there is a sense of, I am so conscious, but there are no conscious men. Let's pause for a moment. I know you're doing the conscious work, speaking to the women who is experiencing this, But if you're still operating from this place of, I'm so conscious, I've done so much work, where is my conscious man? The energy here, everyone can, when you feel into the energy of this, what is this energy saying? It's saying, I'm frustrated. I'm angry at the universe. This is unfair. This shouldn't be that way. I should be somewhere else where I am right now. Which points to work that needs to be done at the end of the day. Because some women, they might have many, many relationships that are disastrous with men. And then they meet a man and it's amazing, but then he cheats on them and it's no longer amazing. And they're like, will this ever work? Will this ever work? Right? And as long as you are in devotion to the highest love and truth, as Layla was sharing before, it becomes inevitable that this person comes into your life. That's what I believe. But when and exactly how and what interests he has, surrender and trust the universe.
I love that. I actually met my previous partner in my 20s when I made that exact decision, if you will, to the universe. I was like, oh, maybe there aren't that many like spiritual men in the way that I made it up in my head. And I was like, but there is a world full of good men. And if I look for that, that opens my opportunities wide open. I also think sometimes men's spirituality looks different. Like I remember when I got together with my partner a while ago, my previous partner, and I judged him really heavily because I was used to doing like Kundalini witch dances in the jungle. And like, if he wasn't doing those things, then like he clearly wasn't as spiritual as me. And then I watched him haul bags of ice 3 feet upstairs in the blazing hot LA summer so that he could make an ice bath in our tiny bathtub. And he would sit there and he'd dunk his face in and he'd measure it. And he was like so meticulous about developing his level of presence. And I was like, oh, like I am humbled by what a man's spiritual expression can look like. And what I hear you pointing to is being kind, having integrity, doing your dharma. Those things can be far more spiritual than the fancy things that we're looking for.
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
I'd love to hand it over to some popcorn questions really quick from the Instagram crew who I asked what they would ask you. I haven't looked at the updated questions, so I'm hoping we have some great questions in here. Let me check. So, and then we will wrap. Wait, where's my Lorin post? Okay. Oh, there we go. All right. All right. Question from Andrea. And let's do kind of popcorn, just quick responses. So, how do you make a man step into full provider mode? Is it something he can cultivate? I know this is a big complaint from women, is some men these days not owning that provider role.
As you focus on your feminine embodiment, that is the highest chance of inspiring a man to step up. And that's all you can do. You can inspire a man to step up. But if he doesn't make that decision, if he doesn't see the deeper meaning behind that provider and that deep service, then there is nothing you can do. And if you try to explain it to him, it's something external ultimately. It has to come from deep within.
All right. Mike asks, how can conscious men find other quality men to form friendships?
By when you see something missing in the world, then you need to be the one who creates it. Rather than saying, where do I find them? Perhaps reframe the question and go, thank you, universe, for showing me that this is missing. Let me create something. For instance, a conscious gathering, walk in nature, cold therapy together, anything, or creating even a little men's group, not totally informal perhaps at the beginning, maybe it turns into something later, but creating an opportunity and saying, okay, let me be the one who leads, create something, and then as the people come, it forms into that.
Amazing. Roman says, what is your vision of men's work and men's groups?
What a deep question. Not easy to answer any of them in a short sentence, but I'll give my best.
The challenge.
Yes. my vision is that this goes much, much more beyond just, okay, and this is no judgment, but just men being a little bit more in touch with their emotions, but really finding their path of what it means to be a man in today's world, that men have the framework, a framework that they can not follow in the sense that they give their power away, but that they have a framework that makes it clear for them to find the deeper answers. Men's work is not about showing men this is what it means to be a man. It's about giving men the resources, practices, and modalities for them to connect with the truth of their masculine core and then to lead with that and to express that. That's the vision I see.
Ow! All right. Tuka says, I feel like men's ego is too fragile. That's why I never tell them if something in the bedroom hurts me.
A man's fragile ego is not your responsibility. And when you say his ego is too fragile, you're also bypassing you stepping into your power and expressing your truth, right? So you're saying he's not strong enough to hold it, so I'm not saying it. But also this goes, okay, do you have the courage in that moment to actually voice that? Because there's so much shame around that. And the last thing, if he cannot take that, then what does that mean about the relationship? Perhaps there is a fear of that.
Yes. All right. Tuka says, and this is a very common question, how do I find a spiritual man? So how do I find a good man? But I do think this is quite a common question in terms of like, what do you actually do? Like where do they live, Lorin? Where are they hiding? Where is the cave full of good men?
The interesting bit is these men will not be found obviously in the club, usually not. These men will be found deeply living their mission. These are men who are on a mission. They're in service. They're doing something, whether it's changing the world through a business. Whatever it is that they do, it can be that, it can be many other things, but they are in service to something deeper than themselves. So you find them in the places where they are in deeper service. So I know someone wants the answer. Do I find them there? Do I find them in the yoga place and all of that? Maybe there is a higher chance to find spiritual men, but men who are embodying that which we're talking about, they're all on a deep mission.
Time to buy your tickets to the next entrepreneurial summit. All right. So final question, Shona says, are you single? Ha ha ha. No, he's happily married. And then she says, and I think this is a great question, what have you done for love?
What have I done for love? I have faced all the parts inside me that were not fully committed, the parts that wanted comfort, the parts that wanted pleasure, the parts that wanted things to be easy. I have sacrificed all these things and I have devoted myself to love ultimately. I have devoted myself to it, whatever it takes, really.
Ow. Thank you so much. This is so incredibly beautiful. I'm so touched by your wisdom. And thank you for being here and for bringing this transmission of what is possible for us in relating to the world.
Thank you. What a deep and powerful conversation. And I'm honored to be of service.
Ow! So we've shared already where people can find you, but for people still listening, what is the best way to connect with you, work with you?
The best way is lorinkrenn.com. All my offerings there, I offer programs, one-on-one coaching, one-off workshops, everything. And apart from that, Lorin Krenn on all platforms. I would say the main one being Instagram.
Yeah, your Instagram is fire. Thank you so, so much.
It was an honor. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to This Tantric Life. I am Layla Martin. This is the home for the realest conversations about sex, spirituality, polarity, conscious relationships, and all kinds of topics that help us live the absolute most incredible lives. Please check out the next episode. Please go ahead and leave your rating and review on Spotify or Apple or YouTube. It's so helpful when you do that. If you want to stay connected to me, the most helpful supportive thing you can do is to head over to laylamartin.com, sign up with your email address. That connects you to me if you want to study deeper with me, if you want to receive my deeper teachings. I do it predominantly via email. Finally, you can check me out on Instagram at @the Layla Martin. And thank you so much for being here.